The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are today. This is Rob Thiessen with Print Audit Software. And as you're joining me, I'm assuming that you know you're doing so for session 2 of the Remote Fleet training sessions. We had a Remote Fleet training session yesterday, and that went well. We'll do a very, very brief summary of that session in the start of this session, but what we want to do today is cover the Remote Fleet Suite product family. Now, I'm going to be going through the session. It should take no more than a half an hour or so to complete the presentation. We'll open up for questions afterwards, but if you'll notice in the GoToMeeting control panel there, you have the ability to ask questions of the panelists. And if you want to type in any questions that you might have as I'm speaking, I'll try to take any context-sensitive questions as they're coming in, so I'll be happy to answer any questions as they come in. Or if they're not so much context-sensitive, then what we'll do is we'll just review any questions that you have at the end of the presentation and take any others at that time. So without further ado, I'm going to begin on today's session. And once again, that is a review of the Remote Fleet Suite product family. Now, the Remote Fleet Suite product family includes the Facilities Manager, the Remote Fleet Suite, which is Analysis, Rules, and Recovery. Sorry, got a little ahead of myself there. Rules and Recovery modules, and combined, all of these products, as we mentioned in yesterday's session, supply the two sides of the print management coin or print management focus, and that is the management of printers, and that includes device monitoring, meter reading, supplies management, all of the things that you need to concern yourself with when you're offering your customers managed print services. But we also, of course, looked at the other side of the print management coin, and that was into printing management, and that's where user workflow comes into play. That's where we're looking at how people are interacting with the assets in the environment, what options do they have at their disposal, simplex versus duplex printing, color versus black and white printing, and how are they using these options in order to economize and get the best ROI out of the printers in the environment. So this, as I said, is just a very brief overview of what we discussed yesterday, the differences between printer management and printing management. And what we're going to do today is we're going to move on to a discussion about the ways in which Facilities Manager accomplishes the printer management side, and how the Remote Fleet Suite, the analysis, rules, and recovery capabilities, accomplishes the printing management side. So under the boxes that you see here, we're listing Facilities Manager as being powered by the Information Collection Engine, or ICE application. That's the main software application that gets installed to your customer site when utilizing the Facilities Manager capability. This Facilities Manager, of course, captures MIB data only. It's a fully hosted web service, so you don't have to install any infrastructure into your environment in order to accomplish this fleet management or fleet device monitoring. And this is a full ASP model, so it's billed monthly. You can discontinue the service at any time. There's no contracts or commitments on your part except to literally pay your monthly bill. This, of course, is what we call device monitoring. It gets to the information that the device knows about itself. And this information, by the way, would also be available through a configuration page. But of course, in order to do that, you'd have to go on site. So Facilities Manager gives you remote tracking of device information, and it is powered by the ICE application. Analysis, Rules, and Recovery, on the other hand, is powered by the Remote Fleet Client or desktop software. This tracks workflow and local print data. This information is, of course, stored on-site. There is no porting of this information out of the client's environment, except if they choose to do so through reports that might be delivered via email or something like that. This is a software purchase. That's the business model that we follow with the Print Audit Suite. And so this is what we consider, of course, desktop monitoring. And here's where you get all that important information about who printed the job, what was the job containing, when was the job printed, where was that job printed, and how, what applications were used, so on and so forth. So I hope that's a clear picture of how the two different technologies and the different products that are part of the RemoteFleet Suite are going to interact in your print management program. Now, we're going to focus to begin with on the facilities manager side. So I'm going to go through the elements of the facilities manager program and literally how it works. So to begin with, we would identify our managed print services customers, or those customers where we want to engage them in fleet management, and they're denoted here by the individual computers. The reason we do that is because the facilities manager requires an installation of the information collection engine, as I mentioned, and that's the ICE application. It's a single software install per site, and there's no hardware required in order to facilitate collection of MIB data, and MIB data stands for the Management Information Database. So the install of the ICE allows you to obtain MIB data from within that customer's network environment. So we see the network environments here, and we can see that ICE tracks all network devices, but what about local printers? We have them pictured here, and of course they are, the information on volumes from local printers as well as the makes and models is available, but not simply with an installation of the ICE application. You then have to go on to install the desktop software as well. And that is the same application that powers the analysis, rules, and recovery software. So all of this ties together very nicely when you're using it under fleet management requirements. I'll move on to look at the data once it's tracked by the ICE application. At that point, ICE reports all of the data through outbound HTTPS from your customer's site. So HTTPS is the secure FTP port. Usually port 443 is the one that's designated for that. Some of this technical information, please don't worry about it too much, because of course we've got documentation that lets you know all of the technical elements, but I'm just giving you some frame of reference here that HTTPS is a fully secured and fully encrypted protocol, much like the protocols used by international banking and internet banking sites. And this encrypts the data coming out of your customer's site at the ICE application. So it doesn't encrypt the data necessarily within the customer site, but it does so before it leaves. And this is a one-way communication that takes place with Print Audit's secure server. Once that information is available on our server, we then make it available to you, the dealer, via Print Audit's passcode protected web portal. All you need is internet access and your login credentials in order to get this, obtain this data through the portal. Now, you have complete control about who accesses this data. You can assign users and give users credentials on this system, and those users might even include your customers. If you wanted to provide them with this information, you might grant them customer access, and you might actually restrict that access to just certain types of information. Let's say you want them to be able to see the meters and the toner levels. This might be help desk support or something of that nature, but you don't want them to see all of your costing and maybe the smart alerts or something like that. That's totally possible because the access can be granularized on a user-by-user basis. Now, what you see here is the information that's available through the portal. The Facilities Manager dashboard, and of course this is the RemoteFleet branded version, first of all lets you see the individual dealer site, and that's denoted here where it says Dan Braniff, that would actually be your company information there. And then you'll see that underneath that company information, you have customer information and then site information. So there's 3 levels of hierarchy built into the software right to begin with, giving you lots of opportunity to organize the printers, the sites, the individual customers in whatever way you need to. Now, under this information, we get, of course, printer information, but also we're able to see the toner levels and status of the device. We can also look at the history of the devices in that environment. We can look at the cost structures associated with those devices, and this is all when it comes to cost, this is information that you've pre-programmed into this site. So we're not magically divining the cost structure for the printer. There is information that you have to provide us regarding those printers. But by the same token, once we have basic information, such as the cost of the cartridges that you're supplying and the expected yield on those cartridges, at that point our system can start to calculate costs for you. So it is a system that will provide you with TCO calculations, provide you with toner level information, provide you with service status information, and all of the device information that you need in order to identify and categorize your printers in the fleet.
Rob, we have a question from Glenn.
Sure.
He's asking, to get the local devices, is a software purchase required?
Great question, Glenn. We get asked that one a lot, and the confusion lies in the fact that we sell Print Audit 6 as a separate product under the analysis, rules, and recovery capabilities. However, for Facilities Manager, as you already know, we're integrating the Print Audit 6 software into that program, and the way we bill for that is not through a sale of the software, so we're not actually going to sell you Print Audit 6 analysis, rules, or recovery. What we're going to do is simply give you an FM-only license, is what it's called. That FM-only license can be used on any download of Print Audit 6, and what it'll allow you to do is track information that is being collected by the Print Audit 6 program up to the ICE application. It restricts that information to just that associated with the device volumes and the device model and so forth. So we're not giving you all of the workflow information that normally Print Audit 6 obtains and is obviously billed for under the modules, analysis, rules, or recovery. What we're doing is giving you information that would normally be collected by the Facilities Manager ICE application regarding those printers. And since they're local printers, I'm afraid that information is restricted to just the makes and models and the volumes that are being produced by those printers. At this time, the local client does not track the serial numbers or the toner levels or the service status on devices. And I could go into an explanation about the restrictions on the technology and the level of technology in general, but I think I'm going to leave that for maybe a more personal conversation. If anybody's curious about why that's the case, I'd be happy to explain it. But suffices to say, we've got the most effective system in the marketplace today for tracking local printers for their volumes and models. Okay, and essentially what we track is 100% of the printers in the environment using that local tracking client. So it is very effective, but it is limited in the amount of information. Now, as I mentioned, it's an FM-only license. It doesn't cost you anything to obtain that licensing, so you can begin tracking the local printers. What does cost you is the local printer itself under the Facilities Manager model. So when you track information for a local printer, we will be billing you according to the level of service that you've selected for that printer. And of course, I'm presuming that you'll select the silver level, since the gold and platinum, the information associated with gold and platinum are not available from local printers. If that sounds a little confusing, that's because we haven't actually looked at the license levels, and we will in just a moment. So Glenn, I hope I've answered your question. I'm going to move on now, unless there's any other questions that are related to that. Susan?
No, we can keep going.
Okay. So The dashboard is basically your cup of coffee in the morning view, lets you see at a glance what's going on with the printers in your customers' environments. Now, there's other communications that come from the facilities manager, and they're what we call smart alerts. Now, we can alert on a whole range of different conditions that might occur on the printer, and you see here there's toner empty, toner low, less than a certain percentage remaining, fewer than a certain number of days remaining. There's lots of little ways in which we've made alerting and the errors that we're tracking or the conditions that we're tracking fairly intuitive and helping you to better manage printers. But there's one specific way that sets us apart from others in the industry, and that is with respect to smart alerting. We let you actually create conditions around the alerts that are coming out of your customer's site. So rather than just knowing every time a printer goes into a paper jam, we can create a smart alert condition on that that says, tell me whenever a paper jam occurs 4 times within a period of 2 hours. You can see how that information might actually be important to you, whereas having the system alert you every time every printer goes into a paper jam, that might be redundant information that would start to get, essentially become useless to you. You'd see that occurring so often that you'd begin to either ignore those alerts or you'd want to turn off the alert period. And that doesn't serve the purpose either. That purpose being understanding what's going on in your customer's environment at all times. And this conditional alert or smart alert lets you filter the information so that you know when things are occurring that might be important, because a printer jam that occurs, printer jams that occur at a rate of 4 times within a certain short time span might be indicative of a larger problem. And yes, your service personnel would like to know about that, but they wouldn't want to know about every printer jam that occurs. So I hope that's clear. There's all kinds of ways to mix and match these conditions with the available alerts and warnings, and I'll invite you to explore that in the RemoteFleet system yourself. I'll move on now to another area in which Print Audit is really a leader in the marketplace, and that's in the area of reporting and data exporting. We give you the ability to customize data reports to your needs. We're not asking you to select from a list of pre-formatted reports, although we do have some templated graphic reports that come with the system. What we can provide you is a report building wizard that lets you create customized data reports that would meet literally any need you have. It's very easy to work through. It follows you, it takes you through a step-by-step process, and once again, any system that's collecting data on your behalf is only as good as your ability to retrieve that data out of the system. So not only do we give you the ability to customize reports, but we also give you the ability to export this information in a data format, either comma delimited or maybe an XML format or something of that nature, to any accounting or ERP systems that you might be using. These would include eAutomate, Lacrosse NextGen, OMD, there's Compass, there's Soaring, there's even DocuAudit and other systems that you might be more accustomed to using with a rapid assessment capability. But nevertheless, Facilities Manager does give you the ability to report information to your systems that require it in the format that you want in a way that's customizable. So this is critical, and this once again does set the Facilities Manager and RemoteFleet product apart from all others in the marketplace. Now, let's talk a little bit about the licensing, because I mentioned earlier that there are silver and gold and platinum levels of service, and they correspond to different prices, and I'm going to ask you to go to your Sharp representatives and to Sharp for actual pricing. I'm not going to mention it here, but I will go over the levels and what they mean. First of all, silver level is the basic or lowest level of service that you can select for a printer that you're actually tracking information, because in our system you also have the ability to select Do Not Track as a level of service, and in that case you won't receive information on that printer and it won't appear in your dashboard. If you select the silver level tracking, however, at that point billing will begin on that printer for that calendar month and any calendar month that you have that printer or any printers set up to be tracked under a service level. Silver tracks meters. It gives you the ability to cost those clicks on a retail basis, so you can provide your customer with what we call the assigned costs, and assigned means those costs that you're charging on a per page basis and so forth. It also lets you track overages in the customer's environment, so if they've got a monthly allowance and so forth, we can take that into account. But silver level is basically for companies that are simply charging on a per-click basis and don't need any other elements of the the device information but the clicks, all of the extended counters and so forth. Gold, on the other hand, includes everything in the silver service, plus it gives you supplies information, service status on the devices as well, although it's not mentioned here, and the ability to create smart alerts around any of the information that's coming out of the system. So smart alerts become accessible at the gold service level on any printer. And so you can now have emails being sent to you on an automated basis whenever conditions occur, whenever a printer reaches a certain meter reading, or whenever supplies go low, so on and so forth. Platinum level service is the highest level of service that we offer under the system, and once again it's cumulative, so it includes everything in gold and silver, plus it gives you the service and maintenance history tracking, so you can have historical information regarding when's the last time somebody went for a service visit on that printer and so forth. And it also gives you very advanced TCO and costing calculations that would be based on the customer's own usage, how much ink they're spraying on the paper, how many service visits that printer required within the reporting period, and what the cost of those service visits were. So the TCO calculations are very useful when you want to know what type of cost you're incurring when supplying pages to your customer. This would give you the ability to make that delta between what it's costing you to supply a page and what you're charging the customer under your assigned costing. So I hope that's clear to everybody. And once again, in order to find specific pricing, you'd want to talk to your Sharp representative or business development manager for the remote fleet pricing. I'm going to move on now to a quick discussion on the second element of print management. Of course, we just went through the facilities manager and its ability to collect device information. We're now going to talk about the analysis rules and recovery capability and the desktop monitoring in your customer's environment. First of all, desktop monitoring, of course, requires a desktop client. And by the same token, for many of you will be aware that tracking of local printers also requires a desktop client. There is no way to track a local printer without installing a desktop client. So we felt as a company many years ago that the desktop software or client-based tracking systems were more in tune with how computer systems and computer software were developing in general, and it certainly does meet the the expectations of many in the business, computer technology, both hardware and software related, that we're seeing a movement away from centralized print servers towards decentralized processing and decentralized print serving. Even you can see any device now that is being offered to the marketplace generally comes with the ability to network or to have the print server functionality built right into it. So the client-based system is really one of the most effective, most accurate, and most unintrusive of all tracking softwares. And it works very simply. You have a client software or desktop client that's installed to the environment, and it's done so through any type of network install methodology or software management tools such as Active Directory, or under Novell systems they would use things like ZenWorks. Microsoft Office offers other products, network install tools. There's SMS, there's Alteris, there's a whole host of different capabilities that are able to deposit the client onto the desktop. Once that client is there, it's tracking all printing, including, of course, the desktop printers.
Rob?
Yeah, yes.
Mike would like to know if the client is supported on a Mac.
Yes, another good question. Thank you, Mike. We do have a Mac client, and we support all of the common Mac OSs from 10.39 and up. So before 10.39, they used a different print subsystem that was more Unix, a little more scattered. So everything 10.39 and up would be tracked by our Mac client. That Mac client, however, still needs to communicate with a PC in the environment. We don't offer a PC, any Mac administration tools or a Mac database structure, just so you know. So we can accommodate Mac tracking on the desktops, but you would need at least one PC in the customer environment in order to host the data and manage the tools. So I hope that answers your question. As you can see from the diagram in front of you here, the desktop clients all communicate through what we call the database communicator. It's, if you want, for lack of a better image, it's a funnel that takes all of the individual client desktops and streams them into one single communication with the database. And that creates many efficiencies, including the need to, reducing the need for licenses on an SQL database. And on that note, this system is fully compatible with virtually all SQL versions except for MySQL. That's the only one that we don't work with. But there is a free SQL server available from Microsoft. It's called SQL Express 2005. And it works very well with our system, so accessing that database backend shouldn't be any problem. Whether your customer has it already available or not won't make much of a difference to you. It's free of charge to them. Simple as that. Now, the information that we're gathering once we've got this infrastructure in the environment, and once again, this is a fully software-based infrastructure. There is no hardware requirements unless you're tracking copies on walk-up copy functionality on devices for which we don't have an embedded capability. Of course, from Sharp, we have an embedded capability that works with your OSA platform. So look into the information on that, because it definitely gives you guys a distinct advantage in the marketplace when it comes to tracking walk-up copies, faxes, and scans, and so forth. Now, we're tracking 35 pieces of information on every print job that occurs in the environment, and that's the who, what, where, when, and how of all printing. There's more information than what's being shown right in front of you here, but needless to say, this information goes far beyond what a fleet management or device tracking tool is capable of knowing. The printers themselves know very little about who is printing, what they're printing, when they're printing it, so on and so forth. All they're able to tell you is, this is my click count now, and then, at the next point in time, okay, here's the next click count. That's not a lot of information. It's this workflow information that's really going to provide you with the ability to consult to your clients and give them an understanding of what print strategy is going to work best for them. And I can tell you it will advantage you as dealers with multifunction strategies in tow when you go into your customer environment and show them what types of workflow practices their users are engaged in, because they'll often be very surprised. Now, it starts with the executive summary. Okay, we give the ability to see all volumes in the environment, the number of jobs, the number of pages, and think about how important that is. Just knowing the number of pages will tell you what volumes are occurring in that environment, but what's the average job size? You know, who's printing large jobs versus small jobs? What time of day does the printer get used the most? And is that usage occurring within 1 hour, or is it spread out over 5 hours? These are all questions that can be answered by our program. We can also address many of the cost issues that companies would face on a per page or per user basis. Now, this information does rely on you to provide a basic cost per page for the printers in the environment. And you can apply that to the volumes that we're tracking and then extrapolate these current costs. Now, further extrapolation of the data would let you see what we're doing on a daily basis and where this current state is going in the future. And that's the key, of course, is juxtaposing that current state. Here's what you're doing now, and here's what we're proposing in terms of changes to cost per page, changes to workflow, and here's what we expect you to be doing down the road, 1 year from now, 3 years from now, that type of thing. Here's your savings. And we have very detailed ROI calculations that are available in order to help do this. Now, we give you information regarding the printers in the environment, so which printers are printing the most. This information, of course, is available to you through the Facilities Manager. So what's so unique about this? Well, it's also combined with, of course, user information. So we'll tell you who the users in the environment are that are requiring the most attention, or are utilizing the assets most frequently. We also provide you with workflow reports. And this report here demonstrates how important it can be to know the difference between total jobs and total pages. Let me give you an example. We see on the left side that the total jobs in this single customer environment, and by the way, this is a real-life environment. This information is fairly representative of most of the environments we go into, so we're using one customer's real data as an example for all of the customers we go into, because this is very typical of most environments. And we see on the left side that roughly 6,200 jobs equals roughly 29,000 pages. Okay, but let's look at how those jobs are broken down, because on the left side we see that the 1 to 3 page jobs, there's over 5,000 of them, make up literally 80% of the volumes in the environment. Okay, so 1 to 3 page jobs, if you were, if you're fair about it, you could consider that convenience printing. I mean, maybe some people would argue that a 1-page job is convenience where a 3-page isn't, but let's not split hairs here. 1 to 3 pages being printed to a convenience printer, that's probably a good use of the assets in the environment, and probably not a practice that you want to alter. However, let's just see what the implications are here, because that 1 to 3 pages, which makes up 80% of all the jobs in the environment, we'll look at the volumes on the other side. Those 80% of all the jobs make up 20% of the volumes. It's that old 80-20 rule again, right? Now, on the other hand, the remaining sections, and those are print jobs between 4 and 25 pages, 26 to 50, we can see in decreasing quantities in terms of the total overall picture. And especially the 50-page plus, there's barely 1% of the jobs that account for 50 pages or more jobs. And yet, when we look at the volumes on the other side, we can see that, look at those 50-page plus jobs. That 1% of all printing accounts for 36% of the volume. So let's put this into realistic terms. If we were to ensure that just 1 out of 100 jobs was being sent to a low-cost printer or multifunction device in the environment, we would actually be affecting the cost structure on 36% of the volume. That's pretty big bang for your buck. Okay? Now, 1 out of 100 jobs is not an intrusion into that client's environment. I'm sure that just virtually any culture, whether it's corporate or otherwise, would accept the fact that 50-page plus jobs should be restricted to the most efficient devices in the environment. Simple as that. And look at the bang for the buck that you get from implementing just one rule like that. Now, of course, you've been arguing with your customers all the way along, yeah, send volumes over to the multifunction devices and you'll get a lower cost per page. But how effective has that been in environments that aren't willing to remove every other device? Probably not very effective. Yep, go ahead.
We have another question from Mike. He's wondering how it's able to calculate a cost per page without knowing the actual supply cost.
Well, it's not. And going back to the slide that where I showed the costs, what I said was that you needed to provide the cost per page on a printer-by-printer basis to our system in order for it to extrapolate those costs. Where would you get those costs per page? Well, that's information that could be supplied to you by the fleet management capability with Facilities Manager. As I mentioned there, that program has the ability to calculate TCO on the printers. So although it may seem like, oh, well, you know, wouldn't it be nice to just automatically have these costs in there, that's not really realistic because every environment is different. Cost per page is a moving target at best. It's very, very difficult to define, and you'll find that different companies have different ways of defining it. So what we offer with the Print Audit 6 analysis rules and recovery capability is allowing you to simply place a cost per page assumption on all of the printers. And where would you get that information? Once again, by using Facilities Manager, you could actually calculate that cost per page. I hope that makes sense because that really demonstrates the way in which these two tools work together.
Rob, we have another question. This is from Dave, and it's asking if he's already using another product for obtaining data, can analysis work without Facilities Manager?
Oh, yes, and that's a really great question because I wouldn't have thought to speak to that. If you got any of you using a fleet management tool that that you're familiar with and comfortable with, we're not suggesting that you have to switch over at this time. In fact, you can get the full analysis rules and recovery capability at any time, and you don't need to be on the full remote fleet system in order to purchase that from us. Having said that, however, your fleet management tool may have some disadvantages to ours, not the least of which is the local tracking capability, and that's worth a discussion. So the gentleman who asked that question, I would love it if you give me a call separately, and we can discuss the tools that you're working with now and how perhaps taking on the remote fleet program would really help you, provide a more comprehensive solution to your customer, comprehensive and integrated, okay? Because that's the key here, is that we're combining printer and printing management. If you're not doing that, if you're not combining these two in the environments that you're going into, once again, you're probably missing 50% of the opportunity there.
Rob,
any other questions, Susan?
Yeah, we do have one more question from Glenn, and he is wondering, can FM track toner yield?
Yes, it does. It tracks the toner coverage, and so the yield comes from that value because it's essentially what you're asking is how many pages will this cartridge print? It's the manufacturer specification says it'll print 10,000 at 5%, but we all know that almost no environments average 5% all the time, and so given that we're spraying more than 5%, what is the yield? Yes, our program will calculate that for you. The Facilities Manager will. Hope I've answered those questions.
We have
one
more, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, no problem.
Glenn's also asking so it can provide CPC for toner base on a price per toner we provide.
Yes, so I'm actually going to quickly go, it makes sense to quickly go into the program here. And I don't mind opening that up right now because it will help to understand just exactly what we're doing. I'm going into the Facilities Manager. Now remember, this one is branded for Print Audit. It's not the Remote Fleet site. But we'll take a quick look at the actual cost comparison, and you can get an understanding of how we calculate costs. So if I go into Device Management and I go into an actual cost profile, and I was to look at the HP Mono device here, what we'd see is an ability to add what the black toner cost is for that HP model and what the expected yield is. I frankly have no idea if these numbers are accurate. I probably just put them in as an example to somebody, but you could replace this with HP color device too and add those costs for the different colors and add the yields as well. And based on those yields versus costs per cartridge, we can then start to calculate TCO, because what we're going to do is we're going to measure to see if the customer is actually printing 5% or 10% or 30% on average, and then we're going to use that toner coverage calculation to estimate what their cost per page is based on these costs here. Okay? The key is knowing this yield. Without this yield figure, you can't calculate a cost per page at all, because you need to know what the cartridge is supposed to yield at a given percentage. That acts as the numeraire, and then it allows the program to actually make these calculations. So we also give you the ability to include paper costs in that calculation. The device purchase price, for example, if I wanted to amortize a $10,000 device and do so over a 36-month period, that would have implications for my cost per page. And whatever costs or whatever pages I printed within a given month, the portion of this $10,000 purchase price that we're amortizing here needs to be included in that cost per page. So I hope that makes sense for people. Essentially what we're doing is we're providing you with, I guess, the three main elements, and that is the cost of the toner, the yield expected from a given cartridge, and the purchase price of the device amortized over a specific period of months. Those are the three main components of the actual cost calculation. Hope that makes sense. I'm going to go back to the presentation now. Susan, are there any other questions?
Not right now, no.
Okay, so I'm going to move along with a discussion about how workflow can be affected in the environment, because we showed here that by just capturing 1% of the total volumes in the environment and ensuring that those 1% of the volumes, I'm picking, of course, specifically on the 50-page plus jobs right now. I could dive into it even more. But if all we wanted was to get those 50-page plus jobs over to the multifunction device, we would then be ensuring that 36% of the volumes in this environment are being printed the most efficiently. Okay? In many cases, gentlemen and ladies, just this one rule alone can make a huge impact in a customer environment. But let's talk about rules, because there are many that you can employ in order to create efficiencies, in order to facilitate strategies that you're already promoting to your customers, yet they're having difficulty enforcing them within their environment. Let me show you just how effective rules can really be. Now, I'm going to give you some examples here, but there's, I think the last time we calculated, roughly 80 million combinations and permutations of rules possible with the Print Audit 6 rules-based printing engine. So that's an incredible number. It's almost an infinite number of possible combinations. So let's look at just a couple of them here. We've got regular employee Susie, who's sitting at her desktop, and we know that Susie has a choice about where to print in the environment. If she didn't, well, then rules wouldn't be very effective because Susie has no choices in the first place. But assuming that she has a choice about where to print, and that includes high-cost and low-cost printers, let's look at what job size limits rules could do, because we've noticed that Susie tends to print all of her jobs over to her little inkjet printer. Okay, now let alone using the LaserJet in the environment, we'd like to see if Susie could use the multifunction more and get that low cost per page. So what we're going to do is we're going to apply a rule, and that rule will say if the job is between 1 and 3 pages, that's okay to send to a convenience printer. Now, keep in mind that these thresholds are completely customizable, and this messaging is also completely customizable. If the job was over 3 pages, however, and in this case it's less than 10 pages, we might want to make a suggestion to Susie, and what I mean by a suggestion is let's implement a soft rule. Not one that, stops the job and just simply cancels it outright, because that's a little bit heavy-handed. In this case, the job's more than 3 pages, but it's less than 10, so let's suggest to Susie that she print to the multifunction device. Okay, and we can see that there's messaging here that I've input that's specific. You could even be more granular or more general. It really doesn't matter. But Susie is given the option in this case, and she can either continue printing as normal or stop the job and reassign it. Now, what if the job had been more than 10 pages? Well, at that point, we could also create a setting that would actually stop the job and say to Susie, listen, we're canceling your print job. You cannot print this to your inkjet printer. Please print to the multifunction device, and we might even provide her with more details regarding the cost of that job. This is what we call the hard rule, and this is for when you want to, this is where you're drawing the line in the sand, literally. You're saying you cannot cross this line. Now, many companies are wondering about how rules would be accepted in their environment, and the fact is, you've got to look at the organization and the culture and determine where those lines need to be drawn, because there is a point at which a line can be drawn. It's up to the individual companies to know where that line should be and where it's going to be accepted by their users. So don't let pushback from the users be an objection, because this program has enough flexibility to accommodate any environment. Now, I'm going to move on and mention that if Susie had printed the larger job to the low-cost device, the Sharp device, of course, then at that point her print job wouldn't have been interrupted. She would not have seen any pop-up windows, and her workflow would not have been stalled by that pop-up window informing her how to print. That's the result you want. You want users who just begin to understand the rules and start printing correctly. And we find that, through studies that we've done with our customer base, that it takes about 3 times seeing that pop-up window before users begin to recognize that there are rules that apply in the environment. Now, speaking of rules, well, there's more. Green initiatives are very popular these days, and they're a big hot button with companies, because many companies, even though they're not spending, they're not increasing capital expenditures, they may be looking at ways to implement green initiatives. And this is a way to do so while saving the customer money. So that's one of the keys here, is that it doesn't really cost. And how do we do that? Well, we might make a suggestion to Susie at the time of printing, when she's printing a job that's 2 pages or more, to duplex this job. And of course, if Susie's trying to print to a non-duplex capable printer in the first place, then the net result of this is more volumes over to the duplex capable multifunction device. So it can really serve 2 purposes there. It can make the environment greener, but once again, it can start driving volumes to your network MFPs.
Rob?
Yes?
Glenn would like to know if the job can be auto-redirected.
I get that question a lot, Glenn, and with our system, no. I know that there's systems in the marketplace that do auto-redirect, but I'm going to point out some major problems with that capability. We actually looked into it originally, and that's where we were going when we first began creating the rules engine. But we noticed that, first of all, there's a technology limitation. If a print job gets spooled to an inkjet printer, how are you going to automatically send that to a multifunction device? Unless you're utilizing some kind of universal driver system, which essentially removes all of the features and functions of those higher-end devices. So there's definitely a technology barrier there, which would prevent automatic redirection from being a convenient and practical alternative. The other thing, though, which I think is even more significant, is the pushback we experienced early on with using the rules systems and having automatic redirection. First of all, users often didn't pay enough attention to the pop-up windows under the automatic system to realize that the job that they sent to printer A was actually showing up on printer B. They'd go to printer A and they'd look for their job and they'd go, hey, it's not here. They'd go back to their computer, they'd reassign it again, go back to printer A looking for their job and realize it's still not here. Meanwhile, it's printed out twice at printer B without them knowing it. They go back to their desktop, finally pay attention to the rule that was popped up on the screen in front of them. They look at that and they go, who is doing this to me? Some machine is making decisions about where my job is going to go, and it does so despite the fact that I assigned it to this other printer in the first place. Just imagine the kind of feeling that would give you. It's like being treated like a child, I would argue. And what we found is that users really did not appreciate that. Now, I'm not saying they're going to be thrilled at having their workflow interrupted by a pop-up window telling them that they should print to the multifunction device. Any way you slice it, you're still interrupting a user's workflow. But with our system, what you're doing is you're telling the user, here's the rule, here's how we're going to enforce that rule, it's up to you to print properly. So we're putting the onus and the responsibility back on the user's hands, and without having to alter the technology in the environment or the drivers that they're using or the capabilities of the MFPs that you're providing and so forth, we're putting the user in charge again, and that at least gives them a sense of control and allows them to say, well, fine, I'll send this to the multifunction printer, but I'm not going to like it, you know? So, Glenn, I hope that answers your question, and I hope it gives you an understanding of what we saw as a pretty big problem with the automatic redirection capability. Now, I'm going to move on to another rule that we find very, very popular in many environments, and this is one that's especially popular with the IT people in those environments. It's the help desk communications rule, for lack of a better word. And let's imagine that Susie goes to print to one of her network printers, and she finds that that printer is actually malfunctioning. Okay, maybe she's the first person to notice that, so she calls the help desk. The help desk immediately puts a rule on that printer saying, hey, if you print to this printer, we're going to cancel your print job because this printer is out of service. You could then provide the user with instructions on where else to print. And the last one here, which I find really gets a little bit of a laugh out of people, is that you're also communicating with the user that, guess what, the help desk already knows about this. Please don't call us, or please don't send us notices about the printer down. We can't get to it right now, but we will. So print elsewhere. That's the key to this, is just communicating with the end user at the time of printing and letting them know that they don't have to send a notice to the help desk and communicate and waste their time with that. Help desk is already aware of the problem. So when you're talking to IT managers, definitely bring this one up, because this is the one that sells the system to them. Often IT managers don't care about costs in their environment. So therefore the cost cutting and even the environmental rules may not be very applicable to them, but this one will definitely tweak their interest.
Rob, Michael would like to know if it's possible to determine whether people are following the rules.
Well, that is a good question, and I guess it really boils down to if you were, let's say you were to allow somebody the ability to click through the pop-up message and ignore it, those print jobs would show up, and they would show up as a violation of the rule. This printer shouldn't take jobs more than 4 pages or 5 pages or whatever you've set as a threshold. If you go into the record for that printer and see a whole bunch of jobs that were 10 pages and over, well, there's your evidence right there that people are either ignoring the rule. Now, there is a difficulty with understanding whether or not rules are being followed, and that is that if our system is effective, then all you'll see is a change in cost structure and the change in the way that people are utilizing the equipment. You would therefore need to have some type of baseline data. You'd want to have 30 days worth of tracking up front in order to understand, here's what the current state looks like, and then later on down the road you could juxtapose that against the future state that results from implementation of the rules. So I guess for all intents and purposes, yes, there is a way to see what effect the rules are having, but no, we don't actually track the fact that somebody received a pop-up and then altered their behavior as a result. Okay? Hope that answers your question. Now, I'm going to move on because there are other elements and very low-hanging fruit to the printing management capability, and one of them is cost recovery, of course. That's where print tracking started. Cost recovery is where most print tracking software companies, including ourselves, originated their technology in the tracking of prints for the purpose of billing, and that's billing to customers or users and that sort of thing. Now, this can be used to set quotas. It's something that a lot of companies are looking at. In fact, we're seeing all kinds of different vertical markets engaging in cost recovery, but anytime you can find ways to turn what is otherwise a cost center into a revenue center for your customers, I think you're going to find that that benefits you as well. Now, how does cost recovery work? Well, very similar to the way the rules work in that if Susie here is sitting at her desk, she initiates a print job to any printer in the environment. At that point, a pop-up window appears on her desktop soliciting information, and I'm going to go into that in a minute. But once Susie fills out that information, the transaction is recorded to the database, and then that data becomes mobile. It can be exported to an accounting system of some sort, or you can have an account debited right within the print audit system. So it could be monitoring quotas on users or something of that nature. Now, I mentioned the pop-up window has a lot of customizability to it. There's up to 5 billing fields that can be used, and the user, you can select from what types of fields. So we've got searchable fields, we've got drop-down fields, we've got radio button fields, we've got free-form fields that aren't validated, so non-validated fields. We've also got dependent fields, or fields that are related to one another. So if the user fills out information in one field, that affects the ability or the selection that he's granted in the next field, so on and so forth. So we've got a very, very robust cost recovery capability, and right now we're seeing a lot of movement away from some of the more well-known software packages due to a requirement to upgrade to new versions, and that upgrade is costing companies a great deal. So for all of you who are working in the law verticals or have any law customers, that's one area that we're really seeing a large uptick right now, is in law companies that are moving away from their current print tracking packages and wanting to find alternatives simply because updates and operating systems, Windows 7 coming out, is necessitating that they upgrade, and sometimes that can be very costly. So keep that in mind as you're looking for opportunities immediately. I'm going to move on now, unless there's any questions about the recovery capability. I'm going to move on to Print Audit's pre-sales tools and the pre-sales tools that are available within the RemoteFleet Suite. Many of you are familiar with the Rapid Assessment Key. Some might be familiar with the assessor capability, probably less so. We're going to cover both of those in this session now. Rapid Assessment is probably the easiest way to get your foot in the door. It's very easy to use. There's no software to install. That's the real value of Rapid Assessment, is that there's no software to install, and it gives you secure and instant results right there on the spot. Okay? What kind of results? Well, device discovery, meter readings, supplies status. Those are the basic elements that that the Rapid Assessment Key gives you. This does not track local printers, because remember, local printers require a local agent, and the Rapid Assessment Key is not designed to be a software install. It's designed to be a rapid assessment tool that doesn't require a software install. If you're looking for more detail or local tracking capability, at that point you're going to want to use the assessor, and that's because this little key right here, it's kind of like a doctor's stethoscope. It's something that you should be using every time you go into your customers' environments just to get the pulse of that environment. Now, that's not going to give you definitive information on how to advise or consult to your client. It'll just give you basics that might tweak your interest in certain areas, or open a conversation with the customer about what the volumes are on that one printer. But whereas the rapid assessment key is like the doctor's stethoscope, I would continue that analogy by saying that the assessor program is the MRI. It gives you detailed assessment information, and it's a little bit more buy-in, of course, because it's not as easy as the rapid assessment key to accomplish, but it gives you the ability to see what your customer's current environment really looks like. And it takes some of the considerations that they have in terms of what you would like to accomplish. Do you want to reduce cost in your environment? Do you want to right-size the devices in your environment? Do you want to migrate volumes in your environment? This assessment phase, using the assessor program, will let you get that detail. Now, we're offering Assessor under the RemoteFleet program as a 60-day option with the purchase of activations. Now, the benefit through RemoteFleet, and this is exclusive to the Sharp channel, is that when you buy the Assessor and you would purchase those in activations, you get the ability to use the Facilities Manager free of charge for 60 days in that same environment. So Facilities Manager is available to you for a 60-day period in that customer's environment at no charge. It's kind of the reverse of the FM-only license. When you buy the Assessor, you get the FM capability for free and not the Print Audit 6 capability for free. So I hope that makes sense to people. I can go into more detail separately on that piece, but it is a good offer, and it's only available to those dealers that are participating in the RemoteFleet program.
Rob,
now,
Dave had a separate question about cost, the recovery piece.
Sure.
He was wondering whether the cost recovery license is separate or is it part of analysis?
So just an idea of how the Print Audit 6 program is licensed. You can purchase those modules in combination or separately, but analysis is the basic unit of the whole lot. So with any purchase of Print Audit 6, you're going to receive analysis as well. So analysis comes with a purchase of recovery. Analysis also comes with a purchase of rules, or you can purchase analysis alone, so no recovery and no rules, or you can purchase the entire suite in combination, which would be analysis, rules, and recovery. So there's essentially 4 products that are available that combine or separate those 3 modules. And once again, it's analysis alone, or rules plus analysis, or recovery plus analysis, or the full suite. Hope that answers your question. I'm going to move back to the Assessor here, and let's discuss now how RemoteFleet allows you to assess using both capabilities. Facilities Manager, of course, tracks network device information. It gives you volumes. It gives you actual meters, because let's be specific now, because we're looking at 2 technologies, and the device tracking or device monitoring technology actually gives you meters. You can extrapolate volumes from that. It also gives you toner levels and service status and error messages. Now, we can give you the scheduled reports that would provide you with volumes. So these reports can show a delta between 2 different time periods, thus getting your volumes. But what you're missing in the Facilities Manager analysis, of course, is any workflow information, and it's also missing the local tracker, the local print tracking. So that's where we look to the Print Audit 6 program, and the, of course, Assessor is based on Print Audit 6. It is the Print Audit 6 program, and that gives you the full analysis, rules, and recovery functions, and this will allow you to track the workflow information in the environment and help you to understand their current state versus future changes that you want to promote and, of course, implement in that customer's environment. You get a baseline of data from this Assessor, and you get information on all non-networked printing, okay, with the, of course, because it requires the installation of the desktop client. And one of the real key benefits, of course, is also the ability to convert assessment into an ongoing sale. Once your customer sees what kind of information they can get from this system and sees how effective this information can be, and even how helpful it can be in terms of determining their policy, there's a very good chance that they're going to want at least the analysis capability, or perhaps the combination of rules plus analysis, etc. So remote fleet assessments in the first 60 days would use both capabilities. And the advantage is that you'd get two sides of the coin, information from both areas of print management right up front, which would be very helpful. And what's it going to help you do? Well, it's going to help you meet your objectives. What are those objectives? Well, first of all, probably volume migration. You're going to want to know how to get volume from one printer over to another. Okay, so those volumes that are occurring at the laser printer in the environment need to be moved over to that multifunction printer. Okay, now the next piece, of course, or the next objective might be to maximize the asset ROI in the environment. And you know, by identifying underutilized equipment and recommending relocation or removal of devices, what you're going to do is you're going to provide your customer with an economical solution that meets their needs. But how do you determine those needs? Okay, what's going to help you to understand exactly what the users in that environment, the workflow in that environment are going to entail? Well, once again, that's the assessor data. Now, standardization, that might be something that you can achieve through just the use of Facilities Manager. But once again, if you're standardizing on a device, you still need to know what workflow is associated with the environment in order to determine which device is the most appropriate. And finally, we've got, of course, consolidation of devices. And relocating or right-sizing the fleet is a big part of what you bring to the table for your customers in consulting to them and so forth. And knowing where devices need to be placed often has to do with the users in those environments and not just with the volumes that those devices are producing. So find the most prolific users of print, and you will find the location that you should likely put a device, or a high-speed device, if you will. Whatever the case might be, knowing workflow once again, and being able to also juxtapose that against the device information itself is a very, very big advantage that you have over your competitors, because you're obtaining both of those sets of data.
Rob, Dave has asked a question as to whether or not there's an NFR or trial version of Rules and Recovery.
There is. Actually, the answer to your question is there's both. We've got NFRs that we're making available to Sharp dealers. We've also got a free trial that's available to your customers. The free trial is available from our website, whereas if you go to the RemoteFleet website, you will see a link to a form that allows you to apply for the NFR capability. And that's free of charge, so we're not going to bill you for that NFR, but we do need you to fill out that form on the RemoteFleet website in order to obtain it. I hope that answers the question. Once again, your customers can try a full working version of the program that gives them 15 days worth of tracking on up to 5 computers in their environment, and the full analysis, rules, and recovery capability using the free trial available from our website. Okay? So let's now talk a little bit about the licensing and so forth. And afraid I was a little bit unfamiliar with those animations, and my apologies for getting those wrong. The RemoteFleet Suite licensing is based on the licensing of Facilities Manager and the analysis rules and recovery. Of course, Facilities Manager is licensed by device. We have a minimum fee on that program, and it's pretty minimal, if you will. We won't cut an invoice for less than $50 a month, but I'm assuming that most of you who are managing printers would have enough printers in the field or machines in field to warrant a $50 charge per month. Because at that point, there is no minimum fee if you've got enough printers in the field to warrant a charge of $50 to begin with. These licenses can be turned off or turned on at any time by you. You're in complete control. You're not relying on us at all, and we'll simply bill you monthly for your use. If you no longer want to use it, then just let us know, and we can turn the system off. You can upload all the information if you want to. It's not our information. It's your information. You own it, and so we will make it available to you in a data format. You can actually download a redundant database on a daily basis if you wanted to. It's entirely up to you. But once again, we manage the infrastructure for this, so we simply bill you monthly for its use. Now, analysis rules and recovery, on the other hand, is licensed by the client workstations, and that's because, of course, it's installed to the workstations. It's a one-time license fee that's billed right up front. It's packaged, as I mentioned, as analysis, rules and analysis, recovery and analysis, or analysis, rules, and recovery, the full suite. So you can buy any of those four combinations, and the prices vary quite widely between those different packages. So if you're wondering, I'm sure many of you are just asking yourself, okay, so what does it cost? Well, that depends on whether you're buying analysis or the full suite. And it also differs on whether or not you're buying 10 seats of the software in total or 10,000 seats of the software in total. The price per seat goes down with volume. So definitely contact Sharp for pricing, because at this time Sharp has some of the best pricing available to you. In fact, they'll likely be beating our price to you in that sense. So there is advantages to working through Sharp on the Print Audit software as well as the Facilities Manager. Now, Assessor is the combination of FM plus analysis, rules, and recovery. With the purchase of activations for Assessor, you would get 60 days of tracking per activation. That's on an unlimited number of seats in the customer environment. And there is a special launch promotion right now, and I'll mention that in just a moment. The rack, on the other hand, is a one-time purchase of the rack tool, and you get unlimited use and unlimited uploads or updates to the key. The demo room package, which we had alluded to earlier, there is no charge for that. It's an FM only, it's an FM license plus 10 seats of analysis, rules, and recovery that you can distribute into your own environment. We also give you 2 embedded licenses, and with the certification training, if you undergo training from us, you can actually upgrade to any number of seats. So if your environment is larger than 10 seats, just by getting involved with our certification training, you can up that to as many seats as you need in order to accommodate your employees. Now, a little bit about the introduction, the promotion. We are offering a no-charge Assessor license, and by the way, with this no-charge Assessor license, we will actually replenish assessors when they lead to the sale of analysis, rules, or recovery. So whenever you sell Print Audit software as a conversion from an assessment, we will actually replenish the activation that you used up in that assessment. And in this case, the promotion will double that. So there's a pretty good reason to get involved with the Assessor right at this point, and that's because you get a lot of bang for your buck up front and a free kick at the can. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. That's really the end of the presentation. I'm going to take questions now, and I open it up to the field. Any questions? I usually like to give a few minutes because it just sometimes takes a little while for people to work up their the exact wording and that sort of thing. So take your time, but please do ask any questions you have.
Rob, it looks like Ben's hand is raised, so I'm going to try
Okay.
unmuting him.
Okay. Ben, are you there?
Ben, you can go ahead.
Hello, Ben? Unfortunately, we're not able to hear you. Are you sure you're not muted?
All right, Ben has actually texted me and let me know that he doesn't have a question any longer. But we do have one from Mark, and he was asking, do all levels of FM report to ERP systems?
Level. So the idea is that if you are tracking meters, okay. Susan, was there a point there where I was muted?
I think you might have been. Yes, I can hear you now. You're fine now.
I'll start from the beginning. So yes, there is an ability to report and export data to ERP systems, accounting systems, with any level of tracking under the FM program. Basically, what you're able to access in terms of information will be dependent on the level of tracking for that printer, but you aren't restricted from reporting in any way. And so as long as you have that information available to you, you can report it.
We also have a question from Michael, and he was asking if yesterday's session is archived as he was in the field and was not able to attend.
First of all, Michael, we will be running additional sessions that will repeat the information that we went over yesterday. So you can always go in and attend the first session if you'd like. We're also going to be making the presentations available online, the presentations that I'm going through right now. So certainly you can have a look at yesterday's presentation. We're going to also be posting recordings of the sessions that were taking place online as well. I don't know when those, they're not up yet though. So we don't have yesterday's session posted, but we will at some point in the future, and I'll have to get back to you on when that's the case. But have a look at the mailer that was sent out by Sharp, and you'll see that there's additional sessions that you can get involved with in order to get that first piece under your belt there.
We have a question from Glenn, and he's asking whether we have similar agreements with other manufacturers.
Well, no, to be honest with you. The Sharp agreement that we've got now in place is rather unique in many ways. I will mention that Print Audit is sold as a RICO branded product under the PCS Director brand. So RICO does offer our software under its own brand name, and that's called PCS Director. That's the only other branding arrangement we have. And so although there are other OEMs that offer our software, once again, the Sharp relationship with Print Audit at this point is rather unique, and I think a very strong one. So there's a competitive edge that you have over the marketplace as a result.
Rob, if you don't mind, I'd also like to include that we don't have any other branding that includes the FM as well. The RemoteFleet package with FM analysis, rules, and recovery is unique.
That's right, yeah. That's the FM piece is not available through RICO corporate. So that's one of the big differences there, is that Sharp has made that available to the field.
We have a question from Glenn asking, is the communication to the ERP a direct link, or must it be updated daily?
Well, it's not a real-time link. It's essentially, it depends on the ERP system itself. It would be something that would be exported on a daily basis or a weekly basis or whatever is timely for you as a company. But in the case of some systems, this is all being done via a web service. So you could have this scheduled to upload, every hour if you wanted it to, via the web service. That's certainly a possibility.
And George is asking whether the embedded OSA app offers the cost recovery option for entering client and cost at the machine.
Yes, it does. The OSA application is very robust, and we're actually in the process of releasing a new version of that, and that will conform with OSA 3.5, which has some distinct advantages over the previous version, which some dealers found there was a little bit excessive clicks involved with doing things like cost recovery and so forth. You'll find that the next version we're releasing addresses those concerns and really streamlines the whole process of validating jobs at the walk-up copier and so forth. Any other questions, Susan?
It looks like that's our last one.
Okay, well, everybody, I want to thank you for your time and your attention today. There is one more session that we're going to be running at the same time tomorrow, and I will once again be your host for that. So I hope that you'll all join us again for tomorrow's third and final session to this package. As I mentioned earlier, there are other dates that we will be running all three of these sessions, and so have a look at the sharp information on the RemoteFleet site and see when those additional training sessions occur, because maybe you want to get your staff involved as well. I thank you from Print Audit and on behalf of Sharp Electronics Corp for attending this session today, and I bid you a good day and good luck with your sales.